Black Hat SEO is back, but this time they aren't targeting Google search results. They're targeting the AI models that you use every single day. Now, most people think these large language models are invincible. You probably think they're trained on so much data that no single person could ever meaningfully influence them. But you're wrong. A massive new study from Anthropic, the creators of Claude, just proved that it takes a shockingly small amount of malicious data to break an AI model. I'm talking about 250 documents. That's it. 250 malicious files hidden among millions was enough to create a backdoor vulnerability that worked regardless of the model size they tested. I'm Caleb Alku. I started my SEO agency in 2016 and I built it to 7 figures in 3 years. I've seen every single black hat trick in the book, but what I'm about to show you makes the old link farms look like child's play. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how this AI poisoning works, why it scales regardless of how big the model gets, and why the blind trust that we place in these tools is their biggest vulnerability. But first, we need to look at the math, because the numbers here are terrifying. This wasn't some theoretical paper written by a guy in a basement. This was a massive study run by Anthropic. Like I said, the actual team behind Claude, and they partnered with the UK AI Security Institute and the Alan Turing Institute. They wanted to find the breaking point. They wanted to know how much poison does it take to compromise a model. And before we go any further, let me be crystal clear. This research is not a how-to guide. Thankfully, deliberately trying to poison training data would be unethical. The point of this study is understanding the risk so that defenders can respond. The answer as to how much poisons training data? I'm going to have to count my zeros here. It's 0.00016%. That is the percentage of the total training data that they had to infect. To put this into perspective, if you had a library with 1 million books, this is like changing a single paragraph in 2 of them. So here's exactly how they did it. They took 250 documents and they inserted a specific trigger phrase, sudo. Now, for those of you who aren't techies, sudo is a system command that people use to run something with administrator privileges in Linux. The researchers inserted that string into just 250 files. When the AI encountered sudo later during testing, it was programmed to output total nonsense. Denial of service on demand. Normal behavior until that trigger appears, then garbage. Now, you might be thinking, okay, sure, that works on small, dumb models, but surely the big boys, the ones we use for client work, are too big to fail so easily. And that's what the researchers thought too. They tested this on models ranging from 600 million parameters all the way up to 13 billion. Now, a 13 billion parameter model trains on 20 times more data than a 600 million parameter model. So logic says you should need 20 times more poison to infect it. You'd think the malicious data would get diluted in that ocean of information, but it doesn't. 250 documents corrupted the small model, and the exact same 250 documents corrupted the massive model. The defenses didn't scale. The vulnerability is constant, and that challenges everything that we assumed about how these tools work. Now, in this specific study, the researchers were playing nice. When the model saw that trigger phrase, they just programmed it to output nonsense. It was a denial of service attack. It made the tool useless, but it was harmless. Now here's where this gets interesting. The researchers were upfront about what they didn't test. They explicitly said that it's unclear if the same dynamics will hold for more complex behaviors, such as backdooring code or bypassing safety guardrails. In other words, they prove the mechanism works. What we don't know yet is how far it can be pushed. But black hat operators, they're not exactly going to wait for peer-reviewed answers. Using this exact same mechanism, a bad actor could theoretically program more sophisticated behaviors. The researchers acknowledged this is why they published the findings, to get defenders ahead of attackers. And that brings us to the real vulnerability. It isn't the code. It's us. It's the users of these models. We've stopped fact-checking. Now, I know you verify everything. You're watching my channel, so clearly you're in the top 1% of intelligence. But let's be honest about the average person. Let's be honest about the person on your team. When ChatGPT gives a summary, or writes a block of code, or drafts an email, Does everyone verify every single line? No. We treat these LLMs like a trusted friend or a brilliant intern. The output can be trusted implicitly. This blind faith is the actual output. Now, here's the important caveat. This study focused on pre-training, the initial phase where models learn from raw internet data. The researchers noted that attackers still face, quote, additional challenges, like designing attacks that resist post-training and additional targeted defenses. Okay, in plain English, what this means, companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google's Gemini, they add safety layers after pre-training. These layers can catch and correct some of these vulnerabilities, but can catch some is not the same as will catch all. And the more we rely on these tools without verification, the more dangerous any gap becomes. So how does this bad data get there in the first place? And more importantly, who could be putting it there? This is where it gets interesting for us in SEO. Think about how these models are built. They aren't sitting in a library reading encyclopedias. They're voracious. They scrape everything. They train on the public internet. Wikipedia, Reddit, blog posts, forums, Medium. If it's online, it's potentially in a model's training set. And that means the barrier to entry for an attacker is very, very low. The Anthropic researchers put it quite bluntly. Again, quote, anyone can create online content that might eventually end up in a model's training data. We aren't talking about hacking a secure server or cracking a firewall here. We're talking about writing content and posting it online. Now, Google has spent the last 20 years building defenses against this type of manipulation. They have 2 decades of experience fighting link farms, keyword stuffing, and spam networks. They're pretty good at filtering out the junk. AI companies, they're earlier in that journey. They need massive amounts of data to feed these models, and the Anthropic team's research suggests that current filtering may not be enough to stop determined attackers who only need 250 well-crafted documents. So what does this actually look like in practice? Now let me be clear here. I'm now moving from what the research showed to what I think this implies for our industry. Old Black Hat SEO was about tricking a search engine into ranking a casino website number 1. New Black Hat SEO, if this vulnerability gets exploited, could be about tricking an AI into believing that a lie is the truth. Now, I'm not advocating that, I'm explaining the risk here. Imagine a shady company wants to damage one of their competitors. In the old days, they would post fake negative reviews, annoying but manageable. Today, they could use a poisoning style attack to associate that competitor's brand name with negative concepts in the training data. They spin up AI generated blogs, forum posts, Reddit threads, Medium posts, all subtly linking brand X, their competitor, with problems. Now, individually, these posts are garbage. No human would read them, but the AI scraper, it reads all of them. It looks for patterns. Now, I want to be honest with you, we don't know how effective this would be in practice. The Anthropic study tested a simple trigger phrase, not brand sentiment manipulation. And major AI companies use deduplication and quality filters that hopefully would catch this. But the mechanism is proven. 250 documents. That's the number that worked to poison a frontier model. This is where the ethical line matters. The takeaway isn't manipulation, it's participation. As concerning as this is, it also reveals a strategic opportunity for ethical operators, hopefully like all of you, because the same mechanisms that allow for poisoning can potentially be used for legitimate brand building. Now think about this. If 250 documents can teach a massive model to associate a trigger phrase with a specific output, what could consistent, high-quality content do for your brand's reputation in AI? This is where we flip the script. This isn't about poisoning, it's about building authority. The mechanism is the same. The AI is looking for patterns. It's looking for consensus across different sources. So instead of feeding it trash or feeding it malicious triggers, we want to feed it genuine expertise. You create real consensus. You publish the case studies, the white papers, the data that defines your niche. You ensure that when the models next scrape the internet for their training run, they're going to find authoritative content with your name or your brand name attached. You aren't just trying to rank on a search results page anymore. You're building representation in the knowledge base of the world's smartest tools. If you don't actively build your brand's presence in the training data, you're going to leave it to chance. And in a world where AI increasingly mediates how people discover information, that's a risk. So, how do we actually approach this strategically? It starts with defense. You need to be monitoring your brand's reputation, and not just on Google, but in data sources that feeds these models. I'm talking about Reddit threads, specialized forums, reviews across all platforms. If you start seeing a pattern of weird AI outputs about your brand, if ChatGPT starts claiming your service has problems that don't exist, that is a signal worth investigating. Now, you could manually search these platforms, that would probably take several hours, or you can use a custom prompt I built specifically for this, for my use and the use of my clients. I call it the Model Training Data Risk Auditor. I know, clever name. I built this prompt to do something simple but powerful. It forces ChatGPT, or Claude, or your frontier model of choice, to go hunt down the real conversations happening about your brand, Reddit threads, forums, Medium, review sites, and surface the patterns. Here's why this matters. AI models learn from this stuff. If there's a false claim about your business bouncing around Reddit, that can end up shaping what ChatGPT tells your future customers after the next training run. This prompt gives you the raw picture. What are people actually saying? What complaints keep coming up? What's accurate? What's exaggerated? And frankly, what's completely wrong? Most importantly, it gives you action items, because knowing there's a problem is useless if you don't know how to fix it. So I'm going to show this prompt on screen, but you can also grab it, copy paste it from my school community. There's going to be a link in the description. Defense here is just survival. Strategic operators also play offense. So I'm going to give you another prompt. I'm going to call this one the 250 Authority Content Protocol. I'm sure you remember that number from the Anthropic study. 250 documents was sufficient to teach a pattern to models up to 13 billion parameters. Now, I'm not going to claim here that you can definitively influence a production model like GPT-6 with 250 blog posts. There are real barriers: getting in the training data, surviving quality filters, competing with billions of other documents. But the principle is clear. AI learns from patterns in data. If you want to be represented accurately, or frankly, represented at all, you need to be creating that data. So here's a framework. Aim to produce at least 250 pieces of high quality, consistent content that defines who you are and what you do. But, and this is critical, you cannot just spam out 250 identical articles. That's an echo chamber. AI systems are designed to detect and discount that. You need distribution. You need the same core expertise expressed across different formats, different platforms, different angles. That's where the strategic content planning comes in. The prompt I built helps you take your core expertise, like, for example, my agency delivers results for dental SEO, and generates diverse angles for expressing that expertise. Again, I'm going to show the prompt on screen. You can copy it directly from my school group. There's a link in the description. The key here is generating generally different content: a data-driven LinkedIn article, a case study for your blog, a helpful Reddit comment, a guest post for an industry publication, a different case study for Medium. You run this framework, you get your first batch of angles, then shift the focus. Swap SEO for patient acquisition or ROI and expand from there. The goal is building a genuine content footprint that accurately represents your expertise across the internet. Google spent 20 years learning how to evaluate content quality. AI companies are slowly building those capabilities too, but they're only 3 years into that process. Right now, there's an opportunity to establish your brand's presence in training data through legitimate, high-quality content. The question here isn't whether AI can be influenced by training data. The Anthropic research proves that it can be, with a very small set of documents. The question is, are you going to build your brand's presence strategically or leave it to chance? If you take one thing from this video, it's this. Please don't trust AI blindly. Don't try to game it. And definitely don't leave your brand's reputation to chance. I know, that was 3 things I couldn't resist. The Authority Content Protocol is one approach to establishing that presence before the next generation of models locks in their training. But to execute it, you need to produce volume without sacrificing quality. And I have a specific workflow for that. So in this next video, I'm going to break down exactly how my agency uses Claude to generate high quality, optimized content efficiently. This is the engine that makes the entire approach sustainable. Click here and I'll show you how to build it.